tuned for today's episode of Breaking the Biz, a captivating podcast where we dive into the world of entertainment by interviewing seasoned professionals who have made their mark in the industry. Gain invaluable insights as they share their personal journeys, offering advice on navigating the dynamic landscape of the entertainment industry. Whether you're an aspiring actor, musician, filmmaker, author, animator, or any creative soul, tune in for expert career guidance, insider tips, and first-hand accounts on breaking into the entertainment industry. Get ready to unlock the secrets behind successful careers and fuel your own passion for the limelight.
Welcome to Breaking the Biz, presented by Yes I Can Unity through Music and Education. I'm your host, William Felber, here to guide you through the fascinating world of the entertainment industry as seen through the eyes of those who shape it. As we prepare to dive into a conversation moderated by co-host Brett Lieberman, we'll explore various perspectives from entertainment industry leaders, innovators, and visionaries. Join us for an episode filled with stories of adaptability, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of cinematic excellence.
Welcome to Breaking the Biz podcast. We've got a great guest with us. We have Arthur Fishel, who is an entertainment funding and partnership executive from the studio Backlots to the classroom. The wheels are always turning with this creative problem solver. With years of experience producing content, he has a proven track record of delivering projects on time and within budget, including narrative and documentary, scripted and unscripted, commercials, branded content, and live events. He's highly adaptable filmmaker and leader, adept at wearing multiple hats in a fast-paced environment with an ever-changing deadline and budgets. An accomplished filmmaker over the last decade, Arthur Fishel has expanded his palette by working in content creation for education, direct response advertising, publicity, social media marketing. Originally hailing from St. Louis, Missouri, Arthur's Midwest origins have impacted his dynamic approach to filmmaking. So I want to thank you so much for making time for us tonight. I know before we even started recording, you were just dropping a wealth of knowledge on all of these different jobs and, you know, where the industry is kind of heading. And as technology advances, more jobs are coming out. So we're very excited to have you tonight.
I'm excited to be here. I've had it on my calendar for a month now, so I've been kind of like counting down the days here.
I love it. I want to talk about when did you fall in love with movies? Is there a moment you can think of that you were like, I got to be part of this industry?
Well, I'll just say that at a young age, it's Missouri. We had 4 channels. Like I don't even like streaming. The amount of stuff that's out there right now is like mind boggling. And, our 4 channels that came in was like, that was our options. And so one of these things that you had when I was a kid was you could, my grandmother was big into this since we only had 4 channels, it was like $14.95, 5 easy payments of whatever. And it would give 20 classic films. And so as a kid, my grandmother was like constantly, we had all old Looney Tunes, we had Shirley Temple, Abbott and Costello, Three Stooges, Clark Gable, all these classic films. And so as I was a kid, and since I after school, I stayed with my grandmother. We, get picked up and I had to stay there for a couple hours. We'd watch movies. And that's kind of where I grew into it, was like, and then once I started to get into like high school, I started like, well, this could actually be a career. And so I started doing terrible, you might remember this. No one else here will ever have to deal with mini DV tapes, which they're like these tiny little tapes, and you had to put them in your camera. And if that piece broke, the camera was useless. But we made these tiny little videos and we had to film them in sequence. And it grew from there. I did not have many opportunities in my part of Missouri for film and entertainment outside of maybe working for like the local, TV station, which even then weren't that many jobs. And so my focus was like, I have to get a scholarship. I have to get out of Missouri. I have to get a scholarship. I have to get out of Missouri. And then I got a scholarship and I ended up at Chapman University down in Orange County. but I was always like absorbing films, watching movies. Our little two theater multiplex, whatever you want to call it, um, would have like James Bond and all these, they'd put a different movie on periodically that was something interesting. And so I'd go and see that. Um, and I was always just that, on be honest, Friday night in Missouri, there are not like tons of things to do when you're a teenager, and like going to the movies was like the big deal. Like, and it still is to a degree if you go to some places, but that's where I really got into it. And then once you're out here, you kind of start to see like it's hard to be in Los Angeles and any part of it and not see they're making a movie over here, or drive by the studio, or you'll be just casually going down, you're in Burbank and driving down Magnolia and you're like, oh, I recognize that company name. I just saw that movie last week. That's where you end up with, like it just kind of naturally grew. And it's one of those like, it's like a weed. Once it starts, you're like, you can't get like enough of it. And you start going after what you want and figuring out how to do things. And, you meet people who want to do it with you. And like you guys have a nice group of, a team as of sorts. Like writing a film is fun. Like working as a group is fun. Getting these things, putting stuff together. It's like, well, I'll shoot your film if you shoot my film down the line. Yeah, that's how it starts. And then all of a sudden you have, a couple little short films that maybe you parlay into your first job as a PA, and then you go from there.
So let's talk.
A long answer to that question.
No, I love
clear.
long answers, and that's perfect. Let's talk about, so you get to Chapman. What do you study at Chapman?
I studied film production, and I will brief you all on this. You do not need to go to film school. Like as a kid coming out of Missouri, that's where my options, like you kind of had to, like that was your perceived entryway into the industry. I don't necessarily advocate for that as I once did, because I can see that if you really want to work in the industry, it's probably a little easier to find some of these access points through training programs or community partnerships. Just thinking like the ones that are out there is like, well, community colleges have access points now too. You don't have to go to a big university. But I studied film production, which at the time was like the all round. You take a class in cinematography, you take a class in editing, PD, directing, producing, take an intro to screenwriting class. I made a couple short films and went from there. My thesis ended up getting into a couple of festivals, and then I was able to parlay it into a job as helping out a commercial production company, making small videos. And that's where I kind of really like transitioned forward. And even then I got that job off of Craigslist. That was not like posted at my college in any way, shape, or form. I tell people that it's not so dependent upon a pedigree or a degree in any way. You'll go to any number of programs, figure out where you're going to learn and what you pick up, what you want to know. You can kind of excel in any way. I liked Chapman. I enjoyed going there. It was a lot of fun. But I can't, if without a full scholarship, I'm looking at this going like, it's 60 grand a year. Like it's really not cheap. I would never have been able to afford college. And I could never have taken out a student loan of that nature or magnitude. And I don't, if you get that full scholarship, great. But, if you want to be a director, you want to be a DP, there's an access point to do it without film school.
Okay. Talk me through. So you do your thesis, you get your first job. Talk me through a little bit of your career roadmap. What led to what to next, etc.
Oh, so I worked. Commercial production companies are kind of ad hoc work, which is to say that it's not going to be like a normal 9 to 5. So what I ended up doing is I'd have like 3 days here or 4 days there, and it was all project based. And as I got more involved in the company, they'd have me start running projects. And so I'd have 3 weeks worth of work because it wouldn't just be my job on set. I'd be helping set all the stuff up, going and meeting, doing the vendors, and then I'd, have a little say in post. And we were doing mean, some of these commercials are still on TV. A lot of direct response is what I was doing, which is, that was it OxyClean, like, and there's all these like, but wait, there's more. If you call in the next 5 minutes, we'll double your offer
The,
and
the info commercials.
give you this free t-shirt. There's one of them I know that's still going called the Insta Slim, which I like it can only be described as like a sausage casing that you wear because it's just a compression t-shirt to make you look thinner, and it's for men. And we filmed, so much content for that. But my job initially was to start filming content because Facebook at that point was like, oh, we can put videos. I was like, well, let's create Facebook pages and developed it out from there. And that's where we ended up I started to get a little bit more of a working experience going. And then one of the producers, the guest producer, said, we have a job available. That's pretty consistent work. We need someone to direct and produce the Auto Trader videos, which they're still going, but Auto Trader does about 2-3 videos a week. And they're reviews of new cars and reviews of used cars. So I had a new car every week and sometimes a new used car. But it would be like a Hyundai Sonata, and we do the normal Sonata, and then we do the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid. We'd film it for, an afternoon. I had 2 actors, and they'd, talk about the product, drive all around, demonstrate some of the things. And then a camera guy and myself and maybe like one crew member, we would do in-depth photography of all the lines of the car, pressing all the buttons. I mean, quite frankly, there's so many videos online where it's my hand pressing a button. But I did that for a long time. I shouldn't say a long time, about a year, where it was 3 videos a week. We were shooting different cars, which was a lot of fun because I got a new car every week. I was driving Porsches and Dodge Chargers, but then I also was driving minivans, and I had this, oh God, what is it called? I think they changed the name, but it was called like an Equus. I think it was made by Kia. Like it was a train, but this thing was just a beast. It was like driving a tank. It turned like a tank. It was trying to be a Mercedes, but it didn't really work that way. There were so many things. And then I would get other jobs periodically through that. Like we go out and film at SEMA, which is a big car convention. We go and film other places. We filmed the Audi R8. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that vehicle.
Beautiful car.
Yeah, I actually got to drive the very first one. That's a separate thing, but we were given an R8, and then we took over an empty one of the empty runways at Long Beach Airport, and we're filming for a full day. But we were all sitting there like, okay, so how fast can we get it to go? Because we just had carte blanche with this car. So it was, I'm sorry, I see a question down here.
We don't worry about questions. We'll do questions at the end. They're jumping the gun. They're excited.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so the R8 was, we filmed it for a day, and the video was up there. And Audi essentially gives the car for free to Auto Trader so that they can put the video out there. They're not getting tons of views, like not what it is now. If you were to put like a fast TikTok out there, it would probably get more views than what these were at the time. But 5,000 to 10,000 views and 10,000 to 20,000 views for some of the nicer cars was a big deal for the Auto Trader series at that point, because this was, shall we say, the earlier days of YouTube. Additionally, since that doesn't consistently pay the bills, you were making good money, but it's not like, it's not a tentpole film. You're not making millions of dollars. You're doing other things. So I was also a reader for different companies, production companies. And so I was reading all the incoming scripts for companies like Laura Ziskin, Imagine Entertainment, a variety of other companies freelance, because they get so many things. They can't, all their staff would just be every day reading scripts. So I was reading scripts, and then, I direct a video 1 or 2 days a week. And so periodically I was, moving up the ranks, and I've had different jobs on set and, directing videos, and industrial videos. Industrial videos are like the corporate video that you watch at the beginning of, like it's, welcome to Star Labs or welcome to nutraceuticals and things like that. Um, you, they're, a 3-day job. They're not very huge high pay, but they were a good job to have. And it was also something you could add to your reel. So I was doing those, but I was reading and working in the offices. And then I started to kind of move up the ranks there and help with development. The thing about the entertainment industry, and most people don't recognize this from the outside, but once you start working, you realize that your like path to where you go is just this one big zigzag the whole way through. And I wish there were a really like consistent answer of like, if you want to be this, this is exactly what you have to do. But working in development and directing, I was like, well, then someone had me rewrite a film for them, a company called GB Entertainment, which got into trouble because I can't remember her name. You might, do you remember Uhura from the original Star Trek?
No.
So I guess it was a company and they paid me to rewrite a script that was going to star her. And, I took my pay and was like, okay, thanks guys. And they're like, okay, we're going to try and get this made. Ended up getting in trouble because they were mismanaging her estate. And I guess her family was suing them. But you do all these different jobs. I was just slowly, ended up getting pulled more and more towards the office side of things. And I was working with all these different companies. And then in 2016, a buddy of mine said, hey, you're not, can you come start visiting classrooms? And so I began visiting classrooms in LAUSD and Santa Ana Unified, Duarte, occasionally in Sacramento and New York, doing basically experiential learning for students. But simultaneously, I started to become like, I had a lot of friends and I'd worked on a lot of things, and you end up knowing a person here that needs something from a person there. And so I started acting as this conduit between organizations as, well, I've worked with them before, they need this, you can provide it, let's, figure this all out. And so I started helping put projects together. And likewise with the school system, they needed, they wanted special guests. So I was bringing in different vendors. And since I'd worked with different union members and leaders, I was also helping, having the unions come out and do trainings and, talking to classes and or doing college. During the pandemic, no one was working their normal way. And so I did a more concerted transition into workforce development and partnerships. And so I've worked with all sorts of different organizations. I know you're familiar. I know you guys are listed on the website for GEI. I sent a number of organizations and set them up there. I helped arrange some of the training they did like a production boot camp about 2 years ago, and I set up the trainers and kind of gave them hey, you guys should do these 3 things. I just, on the outside, when you don't necessarily always need to be the center of, if you don't have your own project and you don't have to be the center of it, sometimes you can be the one doing someone, you can be the outside voice saying, hey, let's put this together so that it goes forward. And so I started working with funders and production companies and vendors to do any number of things from panels to videos to nonprofit workshops, trainings, so that one is like, well, someone wants this and you just know how to put it together and the best, not necessarily the best, I should say, but a lot of the parts that could create the whole. It's fun to do, and you get to, I essentially make a lot of introductions and then, get paid to be a consultant for all these little small projects. And some of them are bigger and I can't even talk about them because my NDAs you'll have a lot of NDAs in your career. I've done a lot, my NDAs prevent me from being on the stand at Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's trial because I've worked with Amber Heard and if they were to call me, my NDAs prevent me from talking. Like, it's that you'll have all these different projects in your career that you like would love to talk about, but you can't because you can't. But long and the short of it is there's this zigzag, and then at some point or another, you find that your passion that you were really going after initially isn't what you want to do, and you start becoming really good at something, and everyone's like, why don't you just do that? And that becomes your career. It's not that you're settling, it's that you're like along the path to your destination, you find where you're supposed to be. And that's
It's
kind of what
interesting.
exactly.
It's interesting that you say that, because like you have experienced so many different jobs within the realm of production, and your background, obviously, script writing, directing, producing, all of those skills. You mentioned wearing many hats. Like, you have worn really all of the different hats. And you mentioned getting in as a PA. Obviously, I think this industry better than I, but that's kind of like what most people say: get your foot in the door and do the PA. Learn the verbiage, learn how everything is done, and then find exactly where where you want to be and where your skills lie. You have so many skills that you like, whatever's thrown your way, you can kind of tackle it. I love
You
the
can survive.
connector part. I love the connector part, being able to connect people, the vendors, and knowing people for what they need. And then obviously the education piece is critical for someone who wants to get into this industry. And before we started, the actual session, we were talking about unions. How important are unions, and would you advise someone to aim to get into a union?
Well, it depends on the direction you want to go in your career. Admittedly, I'll be upfront. There isn't a union for everything. I mean, there is and there isn't. But uh, if you ever want to work on, say, a Marvel film, you're going to have to be in a union on set, because those are union sets. It's just where it's going to be. There's no way around it, especially in California. California, New York, and Illinois. Um, there's just no way around it. If you go to Georgia, it's a right to work state, but even then, they mostly want local 600 talent to be in those in those key roles. It's not, and a lot of the time you don't have to be in the union, but you get that additional protection, and quite frankly, you make more money. The unions have a lot of different options, and there are a lot of different pathways into the union. And I have this conversation quite frequently, and actually had it just yesterday too. The guilds and the unions are very similar, but not the same. So those of you wanting to be in, say, like the DGA as directors, that's its own ball of wax, and the same thing with the Writers Guild and Screen Actors Guild. But when it comes to like joining Local 600, which is the Cinematographers Guild, or the ADG, which is Art Directors Guild, but that also is graphic design and all these other things, there's access points to just, quite frankly, apply and work through their programming. Local 695 has an internal training program where you're paid to train as an apprentice. Not all of them have that. You just have to identify it. I think union membership is very important, specifically in the entertainment industry, because it's exceptionally long days. It's a lot of work, and when you'll see a lot of non-union shoots where people are cutting corners. Notoriously, Alec Baldwin, the shooting in New Mexico. A lot of the union crew walked off set and quit. The union camera operators quit, and I don't. My degree of separation to the cinematographer that was killed is one. I know her colorist is a colleague of mine, and he was saying is like, apparently they wanted her to leave too, and they were trying to get her to leave, but she was like, I really put a lot of effort into this film, and it ended up getting her killed. But the union rules wouldn't have allowed for certain things to have occurred the way they did occur if they were followed. And that's why so much of the crew left. And the same thing happened in Georgia with that girl who was essentially run over by a train because they were cutting corners. The union, like she has her own holiday within IATSE. Her name's Sarah. They provide the most protection. They provide the best insurance. You have insurance. You're working towards it. Not everyone earns it right away, but you do get it. And then you're working towards a pension. There's a VP of IATSE, and his name is actually, I gotta look it up. Tom. Tom says, because my favorite day is when one of my trainees or one of my former students or something gets into, one of the locals. I'm just thrilled to death. And he said, see, now my favorite day is when they retire. He goes, I love seeing union members retire. He goes, because then they have a full pension and benefits the rest of their life. And he's like, and that's for me. He goes, he's like, my whole day is made. He's like, because I like knowing that these guys are taken care of. And so, their house is paid for, and then they can, they want to go buy a boat and drive down to, the lake periodically and fish. Great. That's their prerogative. He goes, but they have that option. And non-union work does have success, but it doesn't have some of the same protections. There is a lot of good non-union work, and you can be successful in that area. It just requires that pension does, I don't know, sweeten the deal for me, at least in certain roles. Not every job is a union job. And when you're starting out, you'll do a mix of both. There is a new union, the PA union, which is 111, which is a terrible number. Just can't say it easy. But they are, representing the PAs because they don't want people to get killed, essentially. They don't want you to work a 20-hour day. And that's where I think most of the unions in the United States have grown out of, is safety. Most of their push is better wages and such, but a lot of it is safety. And if you notice, all the contracts and a lot of these things they do hinge on funding for safety training, hinge on deeper safety regulations. And so if you want to move up and be in some of these top tier projects, yeah, you're probably gonna have to join a union. But I mean, I know a supervising producer for reality TV, and her whole career has been wedding shows. She's not in union, does exceptionally well. But it's, I was like, that's her wheelhouse where she operates. And so there are different options for both. It just depends on what you personally want to do. If you're going to be a truck driver, you might as well be in the Teamsters and, get paid pretty well to do, that. I mean, like, I'm trying to think, the DOT coordinator that I know that does not drive trucks makes $700 or $800 a day, and he works 5 hours a day. He's paid for the full day, and he makes $800 a day. He's like, I wake up at 3 a.m. By 4 a.m., I'm on the phone with the guys, set stuff up. I work for 3 hours. I go and take a nap for 2 hours. As I wake up, I check in with everybody, submit all the paperwork, and then I spend the afternoon writing. I'm working on a TV show. I want to, I was like, something to do for fun. And he's like, I think we're going to produce it independently. And he's like, but he's making $800 a day. And we're not talking any old show. He's the HBO DOT coordinator. And so he was working on Euphoria, The Idol. Don't let anyone tell you The Idol was an easy shoot, because he was telling me it was insane. He would stop and start and stop and start. But those jobs tend to pay really, really well, and they tend to have a very nice retirement plan associated with it. And that's not always the case with the non-union positions. That being said, of course, if you end up being a studio executive, there's not a union for studio executives, but when you're making $250,000 a year, you can usually save a little bit of money for retirement.
Makes sense. So you mentioned one thing with the union, there are pathways to go. And what I've heard from the union is you have to do a certain amount of shows or a certain amount of hours, in which, and maybe you can answer this. I'm thinking the loophole is, how do you get those gigs to get those hours to work your way into the union if you're not a union worker?
So with the truck drivers in particular, with 399, it's a roster. You can get your name on the roster. They'll start putting you to work. Of course, you do have to kind of know someone to do that, but the people who are the organizers for the Teamsters are looking for good people. And if you work with one of, like, say, a community-based organization, um, they'd probably be willing to work with you, but they are going to say, hey, you got to have your, Class A license, which is a 6-week class. Um, I grew up driving trucks. Do you want me to drive your truck? No, I'm a terrible truck driver. It's not me being humble. It's just a fact. I'm one of the few people you will know that has been in a truck accident on a studio lot. And it's kind of a joke that I have a background for the Warner Bros. Lot, because whenever I go there, I guarantee you the person who puts the walk on for me gets a little email saying, just so you know, this person was in a car accident on the studio lot at one point, and you are accepting responsibility for any damage that they do. Those are good jobs, though. The thing with joining the union in California, and the locals here have different rules. And this is contract based for California, and it'll be different than Illinois, Toronto, New York. Same thing with Albuquerque. The rules are going to be different. California, it's 30 days to join most of the unions, and then you have to pay an initiation fee, which can break out to numerous payments. You put it on a payment plan, you pay once, and that's basically covers all your, a lot of the benefits and things associated. There are pathways to the union, and things like Local 695, which is sound and VTR, videotape recording, the video village on set. Good paying job, but there is a pathway for that. They have an apprentice program. You have to apply. It's a commitment. It's not a, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. It's no, you pick it, you do it, you're paid to do it. I think it starts at $60 an hour to be an apprentice. You do your number of days, and then they start putting you on, then you go on, and then you are just in the union. There's like Hollywood CPR, which is a 2-year program. You pick the course you want to go, and then you're union eligible as soon as you graduate. There are some that are trickier to get into just because it's trickier. But the other thing, and this accounts for a large portion of the union membership, is a project can flip. Is anyone familiar with that? Are you familiar with that, flipping?
No. Talk me
Okay,
through that.
so say you are hired to be the first assistant camera on a TV show. It's like an HBO behind the scenes documentary of something. Over the course of that shoot, enough members of the crew decide that they want to unionize, and they will what is called flip the shoot. And so everyone will go from being a non-union shoot to being a union shoot by everyone voting to join the union. And so, what would happen is someone on the set would call then a union rep, and that person would come out and decide whether or not they want to join the union. And if a certain number of people decide that that's what they want to do, they'll flip the shoot. And then everyone then automatically, the days you worked on set become union days, which is pretty common. For all of a sudden you'll have 35 or 40, you're on a 6-week shoot, you end up with 40 union days, and then you're joining that union. Not the same for everything, but that is one of the more common ways that things happen. And then there is the other, where a shoot we'll just say you're on I'll use Rebel Moon as an example. Rebel Moon was the big Zack Snyder project that's on Netflix. Rebel Moon staffed a lot of its PAs through the group effort initiative. And I want to say that was the first project that the group effort initiative staffed PAs for. And they were assigned to different departments based off interest. And so what happened in a couple of the positions is you had people who, they liked them, and then they created the union position for them so that they could join the union. And so when they needed a person and there wasn't another union member available, they'd call the union and say, listen, we want to put this one through and have them start earning their days. And so that doesn't always happen, but that is one of the ways the studio gets personnel, is they need someone, you're there, you're on the list of set, and the camera. I use camera as the example because it's common, but say it's the wardrobe department says, hey, we want to keep Christine. Let's start having her get her days towards 7:05. And so Christine starts getting days towards 7:05. Now, sometimes, joining a union is costly. Every union is a little different cost-wise. I think the DGA is the most expensive. But then, the people on set kind of took a little pool and raised some cash, so she had her down payment to join said union. Sometimes, the studios themselves, if it's through like a DEI initiative or an inclusion initiative, they'll issue a bonus to the individual so that that person can join the union without
That's super
accruing in
rad.
it. And admittedly, doesn't always happen. I wish it did. I've told people, I was like, ask, like legitimately ask. If the studio can do that and they have, a budget for it, they will. But you don't know if you don't ask. But those are a couple of the ways you can join. And then let's see, there is the flipping, there's the general pathway, and then certain programs do have union initiatives where essentially you're going through a high road training program, which are you familiar? You've probably heard of the Brick Foundation.
No, what's the Brick Foundation?
Well, they do a lot of things. I feel like they were selected by California to be to dole out the funds for high road training programs. And so what they did is they awarded funding through the state of California, gave them money, and then the Brick Foundation awarded funding to the local 80 and a couple of the other locals here and then in San Francisco. And so then the local themselves is going to train people and then put them on the roster. So instead of when the studio calls and says, hey, we need a person, the union says, okay, great. We've got Lucas over here. He's ready to go. Just went through our training program. The training program is designed to be free, but the funding is there so that they can start training people. And I think it's like something like $200,000 over the course of 3 years for some of these unions to train people. I don't know exactly what crafts they're going to be training in. Obviously, if it's local 80, it's going to be grip. I'd be very surprised if they did a craft services training, but you never know.
But, it's funny. We did have a craft service person, and what I have found with the entertainment industry is it's lucrative, whatever job it is that you launch onto. She has two trucks and has 2 homes in Santa Clarita, so there's obviously good amount of money coming through. Want to ask you, what's the coolest project you've worked on?
So I'll just say, like, when people say, what's the coolest thing you've ever worked on? I did 3 days on The Dark Knight, but I didn't know it was The Dark Knight. I was paid to set up their office, and it was called Rory's First Kiss. And I thought I was like, Rory's First Kiss, cute rom-com, whatever. I'm setting up the office. And then I caught sight of a call sheet, and I'm setting up their office in LA. I caught sight of the call sheet for, that had been printed out on the printer I had essentially just installed. And I was looking at it, I was like, Christopher Nolan, isn't he doing the Batman movie? I was like, oh. So 3 days on the Batman, even though I didn't even go to set, was still, that's probably the coolest project I've ever been on. Spider-Man 3, the Tobey Maguire one with Bryce Dallas Howard and Kirsten Dunst and Topher Grace. I worked for Laura Ziskin at that time, so when they were doing reshoots in Sony, I got to go, like periodically I was on set at that lot because her office was there, and so I was reading scripts. But if they needed an extra hand, like, run and get something or take care of something, I was one of the people doing that. That was fun to see. Mostly just blue and green screen chroma key stuff at that lot. The coolest set I've ever visited, though, and this is a unique one, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, because Steven Spielberg builds the sets. It's not just straight CGI. Well, real, Ready Player One is an exception, but if you go on the Indiana Jones set, there's this scene where they do this, like, it's a spiral staircase and the pieces are being pulled back and they're going to fall to their death in like this pit of spears. That was a real thing. And we walked on set because the grip team from Spider-Man was then the grip team on that set. And they're like, "Hey man, how are you doing?" I was like, "Oh yeah, well, come with us." And we kind of just walked incognito onto set, despite the fact that there was like Secret Service on the outside. But we got to see that, and they were showing us how the pieces would come out. And that's, again, a grip job is they're all like, there's a guy running that mechanism that pulls it all out, which is a union job. Those are some of the cooler projects I've worked on. Most recently, I visited Euphoria, which my office just happened to be on that lot while they were filming that. And, the TV show, which isn't out yet, I think it's called Patriot or something, with Robert Downey Jr. It took place in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And we walked through like the rice paddy one day. Just because, it's like, "Hey, you guys want to, we're all chilling out. You guys want to see?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." But some of the stuff that you work on isn't really glamorous, but it is fun. And, like Spider-Man 3 was a behemoth. And I spent more time with the writers than I did on set. I did, I worked on Selma before Ava DuVernay was attached to it. It was Stephen Frears at the time, who had just come off The Queen. And so, my job was to, I was reading all the scripts, but then they had actors coming in. So I was, just chilling out with Kerry Washington one afternoon. And that was, my job was to keep her happy and answer questions. And so it was just me and Kerry Washington. And she's one, incredibly stunning, but she's super, super intelligent. I think she's got like 2 degrees in psychology and sociology. So very engaging conversation. But you'll work on all these projects, and sometimes your job is big, and sometimes your job is small, but they are really cool jobs, and you'll have a lot of them. And sometimes you're on these things for weeks on end, and sometimes you're not at all. You're on there for 3 days, and you're at the 3rd day realizing that you're working on a Batman movie, and like every little instinct inside you is like freak out.
I love it.
You know,
We had a guest speaker last week who was talking about how you never geek out. He goes, but he was on a Lucas farm, not farms, but wherever they do
the ranch.
Lucasfilm.
the ranch. He was talking about someone was pushing the cart, and it was the melted Darth Vader helmet, and he was like, "Can I get a picture of that?" It's like one of those moments. Talk me through the biggest piece of advice you would give to your younger self with all that you've experienced and learned, and then I'm going to open it up to the other students for some quick questions.
I would have probably, if I were to go back in time, and talk to myself, I would probably suggest taking on more small jobs and things that I didn't want to do, so that it would have met more people and learned more things. Because some things take longer to learn because of this. But not that I needed to know them, but I would have learned going in, and it would have helped other things by working in this department. And I turned them down because I was like, "I don't want to do this. This isn't what I'm interested in." Meanwhile, that would have given me a piece of knowledge that would have come and supported me later on as I was doing something a little bit more advanced. Especially those of you who want to write and direct, for the love of God, or be a DP, work on set in a bunch of different departments, because you will understand how set operates in a different way, so that you do your job so much better, especially writers. I cannot tell you how many screenplays that I've read where people are like, "Oh, and then it rained." And I'm like, "Do you realize?" I was like, "That's an additional $50,000 of the budget with that one shot that doesn't need rain." Like, you've added all this, for no additional value to this scene. It's just you casually have it raining. It's raining outside. Why? Like, and if it's motivated, that's fine. But when you work in all these different positions, you'll understand, well, that means everyone has to have galoshes, and we have to have raincoats on everything. and you end up, making 500 trash bag covers for lights. I happened to go see over the weekend. I went to see Dune 2 at the Grove, which, if you haven't seen it, was wonderful. But they were, after I got out of the movie, they were doing the premiere for Kung Fu Panda 4 at the Grove. And so as I'm walking out, it's sprinkling just enough that they're having to cover all the lights and all the decor with trash bags. And when you do those jobs, you start to see and plan differently in your head when you're a director and when you're a writer and when you're a producer, because you start thinking when you're budgeting, well, I'm going to need this. And those are the things where I'm like, if I would have done this when I was starting out, I would have not had to learn the hard way later on. And that's one of those little pearls that you look back on and you're like, I probably should have taken that silly job that I dismissed. And I was like, but I would have learned something. And you have to learn those things going in, because I assure you, they will come up at some point or another. And it's better to have said, hey, I remember, having to go through coats for extras, 500 extras on a film or Beyonce music video. That's something, when you're in the trenches with those people, in particular the other PAs, that's going to translate forward, and you're going to understand and lead better when you're a director and a producer and a DP. And that's the big piece of wisdom I would add, is don't turn down those jobs you're not interested in when you're starting out.
I think it's super valuable, saying yes, even when it's not the best pay, it's an opportunity to learn a growth mindset. So I think that's fantastic advice. I'm going to open it up to questions out of the group. I see the first hand is Matthew Paul, then Presley.
Hello, good to meet you. I enjoyed listening to your advice and your things about the industry. I'm trying to be a set worker. So what advice would you give to someone who's trying to start out that way?
When you're trying to start out on set, and just for the record, you brought up Lucasfilm. I was there last Friday, so I put a little thing in the Instagram so you can see kind of what he's talking about. When you're trying to work on set, there's not a skill set that is like makes you perfect for set. There's a lot of things. So if you can work in retail, you can work on set. If you can work in a restaurant, you can work on set. You do have to think on your feet. And I would definitely, if you can, figure out how to do the walkie-talkie, get that lingo down, because that's going to come in really handy. Be very familiar with how to read a call sheet. And if you can, petty cash, learn petty cash. Petty cash rectification is, simple paperwork, but when you know how to do those things, it makes someone else's job really easy and you don't have to worry about it. I would also recommend being early always. But there are a lot of social media groups, like on Facebook, there's something called Hank's Homies. Those are all last minute jobs. Every job on there is hey, we need someone tomorrow. And I would work, if you can, get a couple jobs on a short film or two when you've got a little experience, and then you parlay that into a PA job on, say, a commercial. And once you work on a commercial or a music video, you can work on a feature. Commercials and music videos are 10 times faster and crazier. And working on those, people are like, they can probably stand to be on a feature for 6 months, when it's going to be, okay, we have 6 months to do this. We don't have 3 days to do it. Music videos, are very short shoots, very hectic. But if you can survive doing those, you can survive a feature. It is about building out a network. This program in particular has a great network. And so figuring out what the best access point's going to be for you is going to be, a matter of, hey, how can I parlay this small amount of experience into the next larger increment of experience? And be prepared to work hard, because set is going to be hard. It's a long day. Have good shoes, and be ready to run around and, be as helpful as possible. Because when I started on set, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know the walkie-talkie stuff, and I didn't know some of the paperwork things that you have to deal with. That put me at a disadvantage, and film school doesn't teach you that. but there are any number of small programs and even online videos that'll show you how to do it. And that's better than going to film school in many cases. Those are my big pearls. But if you're trying to get set work, Crew Stories, Instagram, Hank's Homies, any number of these. I think Impact is new, Groovy, Staff Me Up, and Crew Me Up. Crew Me Up is an app. Staff Me Up, I think, is also an app. And Impact is also an app. But if you can join and start, reaching out to people and try and connect to people, the Instagram and Hank's Homies in particular, Hank's Homies, those are all last minute jobs. Instagram, those posts tend to be last minute as well. But last minute is usually someone's sick, someone's unavailable, the schedule changed, we need an extra body. Those are the jobs, and they pay a little better, but those are the jobs that's how you can sneak in and get your first experience, because you're able to jump in when they need someone to rescue them. When you're applying to work on, a TV show, they need someone for 8 months. They're going to interview you. They go through HR. It's a different experience, but those last minute jobs can get you some real experience and set work so that you can look more prepared for those other jobs that are longer and have a lot more beef to them.
Awesome
and most
advice.
of those jobs, by the way, $250 is usually the starting rate for a PA these days. But last minute jobs can go as high as $400 if they're really desperate. Like, we really need someone. I had a young lady who was cleaning up blood they were doing Chucky reshoots, like the TV show Chucky, and her whole job was cleaning up blood all day long. And her shoes got stained, so they bought her new shoes. So now she has dirty work shoes for work and a brand new pair of sneakers because her shoes were stained with fake blood, which she also got to take a free gallon of at home, and she sold it on Craigslist for $150. So don't look for those small, quick jobs, is how to get in and kind of get your hands dirty and wet. COVID protocols and things I used to go to Warner Brothers for lunch. And the same thing, the Raleigh Studios lot, which is a very old studio lot, is a cute lot, but used to be able to just go over there for lunch. But Obama's office is there. So now their security is so tight, it's actually uncomfortable. But in terms of enjoyment, I always enjoyed Warner Brothers and Universal's lot because there's so much stuff. They're huge lots. As far as history is concerned, the lot at Formosa's got a lot of cool history. I mean, Charlie Chaplin built the lot with Mary Pickford. That's HBO shoots a lot of stuff there, but there's all these little tiny lots around Los Angeles. But Sunset, I think is it Sunset Gower? Where's Sunset? Whatever the one that Netflix took over, it's a completely different lot experience now because Netflix runs it. And the same thing with Quixote. Quixote just got purchased by Hudson Pacific, which owns multiple lots. I think they own Sunset Gower. But you have a different experience at every lot because, some lots you're there for a photo shoot, some lots you're there for a feature. The Warner Brothers lot, does anyone go to Cinegear?
I've heard of Cinegear. Is that off off the 5?
No, Cinegear is an expo event. It
okay.
happens a couple times a year. Cinegear, they take over the Paramount lot. And if you ever want to have free carte blanche to just walk around the Paramount lot, attend Cinegear. It's in June. It's free to attend. You sign up. Don't plan on come with food and drink because once you're on the lot, it's it's hot and water bottles are $20, like a baseball stadium. But you can walk around the Paramount lot. I haven't done as much work on Paramount lots for whatever reason. I don't know why I couldn't. I mean, I've worked with CBS Radford's a cool lot too. It just depends on what you're doing and why you're there. My least favorite lot to work on was actually Raleigh's lot because the offices were so out of date. And our office had cockroaches to the point where it was unsettling. And the studio was like, oh yeah, we're going to fumigate. And I was like, fumigate, you need the cockroaches were the size of books. And and the one day they came out of the light and And I'm sitting there like, the studio operations team's like, we're so sorry. And I was sorry. It's $1,800 a month for this office. And we have 5 offices that we're renting, and you can't get rid of the bugs. And they're like, we're so sorry. I was like, I don't, that was my worst lot experience. But I mean, the building was built in 1922, and like, it felt it. My copy room was literally the old bathroom for an apartment. And I don't know how to explain it, but they had just put a piece of plywood over the old bathtub and just filled the bathtub with cement. And so our copy machine sat on top of an old bathtub. And I used to put the printer cartridges in the old medicine cabinet, which was a mirror and lit. Universal is a really cool lot to be on. It's also one of the more advanced lots now because Spielberg invested money into it for HD and 4K. The Warner Brothers lot behind me needs the update because it used to be like, oh, things are out of focus, but with HD, 4K, 8K, and 12K, you can see that it's foam and it's not brick. They spent a lot of money to upgrade Universals for that very reason. But being on a lot's super fun. It just, I don't know, it feels like you're really in the movies, and so you just have to find where you're home, and what you're doing there also impacts things. I mean, if you're on a TV show for 6 months, Warner Brothers is a great lot to be on for 6 months. If you're on a TV show for 6 months and you're at the Raleigh studios, you might hate your life a little bit because parking's such a pain. But again, every project's a little different.
Perfect. Great question. Great answer. Real quickly, Clemente, and then I'm going to come to Daniel, and then we'll close out.
Hi, Arthur.
Hi.
So my question to you is, since you're associated in film, like what is your favorite genre in film?
Ooh, that's very tricky. And it really just depends. And this is one of those things where how I'm feeling and what I'm looking towards. Because at the end of a long day, yeah, like I'm not looking for a heavy drama or anything. I'll watch a comedy, something lighthearted. I don't know, like that show on Ghosts on CBS called Ghosts. So like that's easy watching for me at the end of the day. Am I probably more in tune with like The Haunting of Hill House or Game of Thrones? Yes. I tend to like really deep character. And if you can combine that with a different genre, that's really where I'm at. So it's mostly about character because I really want to invest in someone. And I'm trying to think of there was a show called Justified, which was on FX for a number of years. And I think they just did a feature in a one-off series. And the side characters were so wonderful. The main character I liked, but the villains were so good. And the same thing with like Dexter. You have these extremely strong characters that you want to invest in or you want to hate. And that's what I enjoy watching is a really unique character that I can watch unfold and learn from their mistakes or make new ones. And that's where I kind of dig into it. It ends up being the must-see TV. On the flip side of it, I'll also watch utter garbage just because I need something entertaining periodically. I really, really wanted to like the Halo series, but it's just not doing it for me. I think they've spent so much money to try and make it, sci-fi, where I'm like, come on, guys, like I really want to like cry a little bit for this character, and you're not giving me that. So that's kind of my roundabout way of saying it depends on my day. And quite frankly, after a 12-hour day, you need something that whatever's going to help you unwind. Well, for one, there are a number of different avenues for things, and when you're working as a creator, you're going to get notes, and there will be studio interference depending upon how you approach things. But let me say this: is that my friend is in development, and no one wants your project to be successful more than those people, because those development people, that's what they do. That's what they want. Are there stupid development people? Yes. That's a mean thing to say, but there's a project. Do you remember the movie Hancock by chance? Anyone see that with Will Smith?
No. I think briefly one time, but I might have forgot.
it came out, I want to say in like 2005, but that movie had been purchased and sold and developed, I think 12 different times.
Oh, wow.
And so it ends up being something called development hell, where a project gets stuck and they spin the wheels. I wish I could tell you how many different versions of Spider-Man 3 I read, but after 20, I stopped counting. But the thing is, when you're producing, especially when it comes to animation and screenplays, you can go independently. And there is a number of different avenues that exist outside of the traditional studio system. Independent funding specifically now is becoming so different because the studios are only doing tentpole films. Disney is only doing, their selection of Marvel, and their other properties. They're not taking the same risks, whereas you have other organizations that are willing to do that. Sydney Sweeney, for instance, she produced Anyone But You, or whatever that movie just came out with her and Glenn Powell. She produced that, but that's not a movie that the studios would necessarily run out to produce. And so since she did it independently and found funding independently, she has a lot more say in the creation of the content and how it's executed. So if you're worried, 2008, Hancock came out in 2008. Thank you. The whole point with it is always going to be, you're going to find someone who wants to champion your project and understand your vision for it. And finding the right people to do that takes time. Because I assure you, I've gone into meetings with friends or as a writer, and they're like, well, have you considered doing this? And you're like, but would that be what's the motivation for that? I have considered it, but I'm trying, we struggled with this outcome. And they're like, well, my girlfriend is such and such. And you're like, oh my God, your girlfriend wants to be in the movie. And so that person wants you to write out a whole part for her. And I've been on so many small budget independent features where it's the producer funds the film for his young girlfriend. And that person is inevitably not the best dancer in the world.
Makes me think of a Amber Heard, Johnny Depp right there.
Well, what's funny is that it wasn't all of them. That was definitely not. With Amber, I was on an NBC TV show. Amber's actually incredibly intelligent, and she and I would have I was interviewing for the writer's room, and she and I would have these intense debates because she was raised extremely Catholic, Opus Dei Catholic, and I was also raised extremely Catholic. And so we would debate the patriarchy and the pitfalls of religion, which caused a lot of, interesting conversations on set, especially when, like everyone's like, it was like Jenna Dewan, her, Laura Benanti, and we're all talking about religion. And the show was called The Playboy Club, and it was supposed to be the response to Mad Men. But you're going to work with so many different people, and they're going to have their opinions. You have to be open to people's input, because sometimes people know better than you. And that's not to say that they know your work better than you, but their background is perfect for something, and they have an input and a perspective that they need to lean into, which is why inclusivity and diversity is important. Because I can't speak to the background growing up in an inner city, with a single mother. I've never, that's not my background. But someone else who has that experience does have a better perspective on how that would be. My friend just, he's episode 4 of, oh God, what is it? Percy Jackson. Takes place in St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis. He's from St. Louis. And he's like, we had a full conversation because they wanted to do stuff. And he's like, I told them, I was like, as a black man, he goes, as a young black girl in St. Louis, he goes, you have to understand, running from the cops would mean this, and understanding the police in that area would be this. He goes, you have to understand that perspective. So my suggestion is also going to be mindful that some people's perspective and input into your script is going to help it, and be open to that, because quite frankly, you never know what they know and what, well, also who they know, but you never know where they can help you grow personally too in your writing, which is tricky. Uh, Diving in though, if you're trying to work into joining, becoming a writer, there are a lot of different writing programs out there. Um, Across the board, there are so many different initiatives. So I do mean this, figure out where you'd find a good home and start applying and connecting. But like the Blacklist, for instance, is a great, they have a lot of cool access points there, which is, it's called the Blacklist because it started out as the scripts that were the most desired but weren't produced. And they would turn out this list every year, about 100 scripts that were amazing, but no one was making. And so if you were making it on the Blacklist, it meant that you were like the top writer to watch. And you have a lot of the people on those lists end up being on TV shows. But now they've turned it into, we have writing programs and screenplay contests and writers' rooms. But there are a number of different foundations and organizations, like the Nichols Fellowship just opened up, I think, yesterday. There are a lot of different programs that are supporting writers, and even the Writers Guild itself is now starting to do that as well. I think there's a writer's room training program for, if you are trying to become not staff writer, but become staffed in the writer's room as a writer's PA or a coordinator. They have programming for that. But those are some access points you should look into.
Perfect. Arthur, you are a wealth of knowledge. What an amazing, fun hour hearing your career roadmap, hearing the advice. So many different websites, Hawks, Homies, Impact, Crew Map, Groovy, tons of really solid knowledge. I want to thank you. I am going to reach out to you offline because I think we could definitely use your knowledge and relationships. I love the fact that you are a connector. I take pride in being a connector, and I think that is one of the most valuable assets out there. But amazing to hear how you went from the one info commercials to auto trader videos to doing everything that you've done. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your career roadmap, and inspiring our crew.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great to connect with you all.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope you've been inspired by the conversation you just heard. Before we sign off, it's crucial to acknowledge the role of Yes I Can in making Breaking the Biz a reality. Yes I Can, a transformative program dedicated to empowering young individuals with disabilities through education, advocacy, and mentorship, stands as a beacon of innovation and progress. This podcast is a testament to the program's commitment to fostering talent and providing platforms for meaningful conversations. Through Breaking the Biz, Yes I Can continues its mission of empowering voices, breaking barriers, and shaping a more inclusive and accessible world. Remember, each episode is not just a story shared. It's a step forward in the collective journey of growth, learning, and empowerment championed by Yes I Can. Thank you for joining us on Breaking the Biz. Until we meet again, keep turning dreams into reality and spreading positivity through every action. I'm your host, William Felber. See you next time.